By the way, this is Tuesday Tune-Ups. I'm Marguerite Crespillo. We do this every single week, open to everybody with any company. So come on in and join us. And when I was brand new, I got invited to a cold calling class at Placer Title back in the day. And so I went to this cold calling class with a friend of mine, Mike Mussolino, who was in the mortgage business at the time. And we went into this cold calling class, and we all sat down at this table. Back then, we didn't have cell phones, so that's going to date me a bit. And they handed us a phone book and said, start calling. And I'm like, call who? And say what? And they're like, just call, ask them if they want to buy or sell a home.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious. So I was pretty traumatized. I spent about an hour doing it. I had cold sweats, wanted to throw up. It was no fun.
Yeah.
And Mike, who was sitting next to me, this blows. Let's go to the bar. So true story. We left there. We went down the street to, I want to say it was El Chorritos or something. They didn't have a whole lot in Roseville at the time.
Yeah.
And went into the bar, started having happy hour cocktails. And next thing, we started talking to the people around us. We ended up getting 2 clients at the bar in Roseville after our cold calling class. And I said, okay, and everyone said, oh, you won't make it if you don't cold call. I said, I'm going to have to figure out a different way because I can't do this. And I'm not going to say I started hanging out at the bar. That's not true. But I did get business there. But what I realized is, for me, and everybody has their different styles, and cold calling works. I know it works. I had to find a different way. So I ended up that year having a Christmas party. I said, I'm going to have a Christmas party. I wanted to invite all my girlfriends. I wanted an excuse for all the guys to get dressed up. So I'm like, the guys had to wear a suit or a tux or something like that, because we wanted to get fancy dresses. So I had a Christmas party that year with about 30, 40 people who came.
Wow.
Out of it, I got 4 transactions.
Oh my gosh.
True story. So I said, here's the deal. I'm going to start having parties and events, and I'm going to figure out how to get my face in front of people. How am I going to go network? How am I going to connect with people? How am I going to get in front of them? So I did a couple things. Number one, I started doing open houses till the cows came home. I literally did open houses every single weekend, sometimes 2 and 3 on a weekend. And I started doing parties and client events. I had young kids at the time. I had 3 little boys when I started in real estate. So they were 1, 2, and 5. I remember I had an Easter party after the holiday party, and I just invited all my friends, all my family, all my clients, anybody that I knew. Like, just so you guys know, whenever I've had parties, it's an open invitation. So if you ever hear that I'm having a party, just come. Don't feel like you have to have an invitation. Not only did I invite all my friends, clients, but I also invited other real estate agents and other associates, having no idea that I was going to actually start to build a brokerage, right? So I ended up having an independent brokerage, built a brokerage, and a lot of those agents came and worked for me. And then here, 20 some odd years later, I joined EXP, which allowed me to bring agents onto EXP. So I never really used it as recruiting per se. I've never been one to cold call and recruit. I've never been one to cold call and generate leads. And so I just had to find another way, right? Everything is figure outable if you want it bad enough, and I did. So if you are struggling with cold calling, there's a few options. First of all, you can hop on calls, which is what I've been doing lately, because you can teach an old dog new tricks. So I've been hopping on. There's a great call every day at 7:30 called Breakfast Club. And they do cold calling. And I sat in this morning and listened to them call expireds. When it comes to recruiting, I've sat in on, there's a group called Attract Boss, and I've sat in on that and I've listened. And I'm not going to lie and say I've made any cold calls, because I want to be really transparent on this. What I have learned, though, in listening to those conversations is how to handle objections, which I think is the biggest challenge that many of us face, is how to handle objections, how to not just give up and walk away, go, okay, when they say, no, I'm not going to buy right now. Okay, bye. And you just hang up. How you handle those objections. So I've really been intentional, is I guess the best word, in listening to people who are doing it, because I didn't do it. And it has worked for me, but relationship marketing has been my tool that has worked the best for me. It's what got me into REO. It's what got me. Now, I'm not going to say, here's the thing that I think people think. I think when people talk about relationship marketing, they think that you're lazy in all the other areas. And they think that you don't have to work as much. The truth is, to be able to do the kind of volume that I did, which I've sold over 4,000 homes, I was very intentional about what I did and how I did it. And it means that you still have to do a lot of the work, right? And what I see with many people is they think that they're not consistent. Like, anybody can be successful if you're consistent. You don't have to be smart. You don't have to be talented. You don't have to be anything other than consistent. And if you are consistent for the next 100 days, like we're here in the fourth quarter, right? And this is, if you guys want to be broke at Christmas, do nothing. If you want to make money and have plenty of resources available at Christmas, you got to be hitting it really hard right now. And consistency trumps everything else. I've seen it. I've seen people who have practically no talent, even when it comes to singing or anything else, become hugely successful because they were consistent. And so it's just, there's a ton of value in that, what you do every day. Like, I got challenged to do 100 videos over the next 100 days. So that's my goal, is to record 100 and post 100 videos over the next 100 days. So what does that consistency look like for you? And if it's calling, how many of you are consistent in calling, whether that's cold calling, whether that's database calling, whether that's business calling, networking, recruiting, whatever it is you're doing? I'd love to hear from you guys. A few more of you hopped on. I was actually doing some one-on-one conversation with Isaac, and it turned into me rambling on and on. Today, the goal was to, what do you guys need? What do you need help with? What can we mastermind around? And what I was talking with Isaac about was that I've been hopping on a morning breakfast call where they're cold calling, and that isn't something that I've historically done. Even me, after being in business 30 years, can shift and change and look at different ways of doing things. My question to you is, what are you currently doing? What is it you want to change or challenge yourself for over the next 100 days? Please speak up. This isn't a Marguerite show only. Everybody, I don't see anybody's faces. I'm talking to black screens. Anybody here? What do you guys want to say? What do you have to say today? Irina, Alina, Chris, iPhone. Who's iPhone? Who's that?
I think what you said about the people misinterpreting relationship as laziness is really accurate, because I've talked to people who haven't done a lot of deals at all. And they're like, oh, no, it's because I work on like repeat and referral business, so I don't prospect. Okay, so how are you doing business? And they're like, oh, I'm doing this and this. Okay, how many deals have you closed? I feel like maybe you can get to the repeat and referral business once you've built it, once you've done the work to get there. I think that you working on the relationship side has definitely worked because you've hosted those events, because you've done open houses. I think people who don't do anything are like, oh no, my friends know me, my friends know other people, they'll let them know. Okay, good luck with that.
You know what? I love that, Isaac, because that's so true. And then guess what happens? Their friends ends up using somebody else because that agent wasn't vocal about what they do. And I see it all the time in all the Facebook groups, the lab coats and real estate rock stars and mastermind, all those different groups, of somebody complaining how their cousin or their sister-in-law or their friend down the street or their neighbor or somebody used somebody else. And a big part of that is, how are you staying in contact with your friends and family and your database? You're right. It's a double-edged sword. I'm not going to say because I built my business on relationships that I don't prospect. Like, a huge part of what I do is prospecting, but it's disguised a little bit as a client event. It's disguised a little bit as my monthly newsletter that goes out, a little letter of the heart about me and my life. It's disguised a bit as open houses. It's disguised a bit as me literally making 10 talk tos a day, calling people in my database to just check in with them. How's life? How's things? What's going on with you? How can I help you in your life, in your business, and whatever it is I can help you with? How can I give? How can I help? How can I contribute? So you can dream about it and talk about it all day long, but it's not relevant if there's no action behind it. So great point, Isaac. That's so true. It's really valuable that you have to, and you can do both. So when your comment that how are you going to have a relationship business if you didn't prospect? You're absolutely right. So think about this though, as you're building a relationship with each client that you're working with, how can you make sure that you're doing such a fantastic job and you're creating such valuable contribution that they want to come back to you, that they want to refer you? So there are two pieces of it, right? There's the agents who do the calling and they do what I call churn and burn. They just get them in the door, get them out, get them in the door, get them out. Then there's the people who get them in the door, but you nurture and take that relationship to the next level. How can you make it such a great experience that they want to come back to you again? But not just remember you, like you have to stay in contact, right? So I can't even tell you how many times I have been to an agent, been to a client's house, and they have all this marketing material from another agent. I'm like, well, why didn't you call them? First of all, I've never heard from them, right? So what happens many times is you help a client, you close the deal, you get your commission check, and you break up with them. You never talk to them again. You don't follow up with them. You don't send out little letters and newsletters. You don't check in with them. You don't have parties to invite them to. You don't have any of this follow-up once you've closed the deal. So we wonder why we have this bad reputation. We helped them sell their house. We might have done an adequate average job. We didn't do anything that went above and beyond. And then guess what? They went to the closing table. You didn't show up at the closing. And the second biggest number on the net sheet is your commission. And they're looking at that going, I just paid this agent $22,000 for what? Or $10,000 or $9,000, whatever. What did they do? You couldn't even bother to show up to a closing. This has been the best lesson that I've learned and taught in my career, you guys, is show up to your client's closing. Make it special. Go over the top. It's a big deal. Show up with balloons. If you don't have a budget, go get some cheap $10 balloons. If you can afford it, come with a gift. Come with something that makes them feel special, that you really genuinely cared. If you take the time in the transaction to pay attention to the details, love is in the details, right? So's lots of money in the details. Lots of referrals, lots of repeat clients are in the details, the little things that make people feel important and special and that you genuinely cared. So what are you currently doing in that part of the process? Because Isaac, if you do what you're currently doing, which you're a rock star when it gets on the phones, and you take it to that next level and you do an extraordinary job for these people and you continue to follow up with them for years, then trust me, 10 years down the road, you're going to be talking like I'm talking, right? Maybe 5 years, even 20, 30 years, you're going to be having this repeat and referral business where you don't have to put in the kind of stuff that you're doing now. And it can
that's the goal.
work, right?
20.
What were you going to say, Isaac?
Oh, I said that's the goal.
Yeah. And so keep that in mind that as you're building this business, there's a couple parts, right? There's the before, during, and after. The before process is how do you get your business? How do you get that business to come in the door? Is that cold calling? Is that open houses? Is that door knocking? Is that connecting with businesses? What are you doing to get that business to come in the door? That's what's really important when you're creating your one-page business plan. I teach a whole class on that. I think it's available on my YouTube, but if not, we'll probably revisit it here again before the end of the year. So how are you generating your business? That's what's called marketing. And if you guys think you're just a real estate agent, you really genuinely should be a marketing expert. Marketing is what gets people in the door, one way or another, okay? The second part is during. What happens in that experience during the process? From the time they raise their hand and they say, I want to work with you, Isaac, what does that process looks like all the way until they close the transaction? And I challenge all of you guys to take some time to write that down. What do you want it to be like? That's a big part of why I have my client discussion checklist that goes through a lot of things to help them understand what to expect. And then what do you want that experience to look like? Okay, from the time they get an offer accepted to what the inspection period looks like to the last 10 days when people are losing their mind. You guys, a real estate transaction is a highly emotional experience. They rate it right up there with death and divorce on the stress meter. People are whacked out in the middle of a real estate deal. Great people become not so great in the middle of a real estate deal. What can you do to make that experience something that you would want to go through? Like, how many of you guys have bought or sold a home in the last 2 years? Anybody? Or gotten a loan? Anyone? Have any of you guys bought or sold a home or got a loan in the last 2 years? Nobody's answering. But
yes, I have, Marguerite.
Alina,
Sorry, I couldn't push my button.
How was that experience, both on the real estate side and the loan side?
It was hell. I'm going to be completely honest with you. It was an isolated type of situation, Marguerite. Some of the real estate tuition, as we refer it to, but it was a revocable living trust refinance within the property, and it was hell. And I have that experience now.
And so if you guys think about that's what our client, you said it's a unique situation, but it's not. Like, every deal has a unique thing that comes up in it, right?
That's
Something
true.
wacky comes up in every real estate deal. And you guys, that's what our clients are experiencing. So what you do from every transaction like that is, what were the hell points? What were the mistakes? What were the things that weren't taken care of or weren't handled like they should have been? What could you have done differently?
Leah.
And that's how I created my client discussion checklist. Is I went through basically on that client discussion checklist and I said, what are the mistakes that have happened in the real estate deal and how can I change it? How can I make it where that doesn't happen? How can I assume that nobody else is going to do their job in the real estate deal? How can
Oh my
I
gosh, you're objection handling before they come up. That's crazy.
100%. If you guys have not sat through my client discussion checklist, my buyer presentation, please go watch it on YouTube. And the thing is that you are objection handling before it happens. A perfect example, you guys, and some of you might not relate to this. When I first got into real estate, HUD had a program where you could buy a house for $500 down, right? It was a $500 down program. And guess what? My first client, I'm so excited. I'm going to get him this home in this $500 down program. And all they need is $500 down. We get into contract. We get almost to the close of escrow. And guess what? They have to come in with more than $500 down because they have closing costs. And they have real estate closing costs and loan closing costs. Guess what? I got the seller to pay the real estate closing costs, but I didn't take into consideration that the lender would not explain to them how loan fees worked. So guess what? We get down to close of escrow and they're like, all I got is $500. So I had to go into my client discussion checklist and I had to talk about a few things. Number one, how earnest money works, how deposits work, how closing costs work, you guys. There are real estate closing costs and there are loan fees. We cannot assume that they're always going to use our lender. We cannot assume that the lender is going to be as good as we are or as good as our normal lender. And that the lender is going to sit down and break down all the closing costs and make sure that they have sufficient funds. We can't assume anything. So we need to explain, hey guys, guess what? There's going to be some upfront costs. There's going to be an earnest money deposit. You're going to have to pay for things like inspections and appraisal. And those are some fees you're going to need to pay up front. Let me ask you, Isaac, do you have about $2,500 available now to get through the upfront fees? So these are things that you need to think about, right? Other things that go wrong. Typically, I just had a situation where, guess what? The buyer canceled because they found out there'd been a death in the home. Now, how did they know that ahead of time? The agent didn't disclose it. I suggested in my upfront conversation, my client discussion with them, hey guys, one of the best things you can do is go talk to neighbors. They are your best source of gossip. They can't wait to tell you what's going on in the neighborhood, right? Go by on a Friday night, see who's out there partying and who's got their boombox going. Go by on a Saturday morning and see who's mowing their lawn, see what dogs are barking, see what's going on in that neighborhood. Because where you live, Chris, where you want to live, I might not be comfortable in that neighborhood. And vice versa. You might not be comfortable where I live. But if you go talk to neighbors, the neighbor's going to say, oh yeah, that guy's grandma kicked the bucket 6 months ago, right? The neighbors tell you stuff. Or they'll say, man, you don't want to buy that house, Isaac, because that guy, the whole thing flooded and he just put lipstick on a pig, right?
Wait, so I have a question about that, actually.
Okay.
If someone died in the past 3 years, why wasn't it disclosed?
In that situation, they had died 4 years ago. But keep in mind a couple things. Here's my personal policy. If they ever died in the home, you tell your people. Because there are certain cultures that are very, very don't want to live in a home where somebody's died. Some cultures have that. Some people have hangups. And again, also it might depend on how they died. If somebody died of natural causes, grandma died because she was, 104, people might not have issues with that. But if somebody committed suicide or there was a murder, we had a house in Wheatland where it had a couple issues. First of all, the mom lived there, her son lived with her in the back room, and her son was a sex offender. So there was a revenge murder where somebody came to the house and went in the house, went to the room and murdered the guy in the back bedroom. Okay. So the house had a stigma on it and the whole town knew about it. But guess what? Grandma had died. So there was no one there. Technically on the disclosure, it was a trust sale. And in a trust situation, the disclosures aren't required, right? That was the situation with that particular one. And I heard the story. So now I had to disclose it, right? But the thing is that these are things that you want to, my point was tell your clients to go talk to neighbors. It's better that they find out now than find out after it closes and now they're mad and there's a lawsuit, right? Talking to neighbors is a huge one. This is a big one. And also explaining how pest reports work and how home inspections work. Explain how that process works, right? Because what typically happens if you don't explain this up front? They get the home inspection back and there's 17 items that need to be repaired and they think the seller didn't disclose it, number one. So they think the seller's trying to hide something. And now they're all bent out of shape. That plug behind the couch that grandma forgot about doesn't work. And they're like, oh, she was trying to hide it. So the more that you can explain a lot of these things up front, the better it is, right? And you're right, Isaac, objection handling up front out of the gate. You guys, one of the big reasons why agents struggle in this industry as a whole, they really literally never learned the process and how to keep deals together. Selling homes, you guys, is easy. Selling them is the easy part. Closing them, whole different ballgame, right? Without them canceling 2 or 3 times or out there being all kinds of problems and issues. Closing the deal is genuinely where the challenge is, more so than actually getting it sold or getting an offer accepted. I realize getting offers accepted is not easy, especially in this market. But the truth is, getting offers accepted is not the biggest challenge. Getting it actually to the finish line is where the challenges lie. And the more that you can address those, because here's the thing, and I've preached this a million times, there's a fine line of trust. Here's how trust works. When I explain something to you up front, you go, and then that happens, you go, oh yeah, Marguerite warned me about that. And you trust me. When I don't explain something to you up front, and then it happens, you go, what else didn't she tell me? What else might she have missed? Where else might there be a mistake? So building that trust up front and making people feel comfortable is one of the most important things. And digging back into the experience and how things work, doesn't that make the experience 1,000 times better when they trust you and they believe you because you have followed through on what you said? And there's little things in those experiences that make people feel more comfortable and feel more connected to you and willing to work with you and refer you. For example, this is not real estate related, but if any of you have shopped at Nordstrom, they have the world-class service, right? They literally have extraordinary service. one of the little details they do at Nordstrom, and you might not have ever even paid attention to it, is once they ring your stuff up, they put it all in the bag, they walk around the counter to hand it to you. Instead of taking this and trying to reach across the counter and you're trying to grab it, it might be heavy and it's all awkward and uncomfortable. Like that little detail, does that make a difference? You guys, we're in an industry and a world right now where service has dropped to an all-time low. I used to stop, I stopped shopping at Walmart 99% of the time because I don't want to do my own checking, right? Now places like Target are doing the same thing. Now places like Home Depot and Lowe's, they're all doing self-serve checkouts. It's worth it to me to pay extra to have somebody check my own groceries. I don't want to do it myself. I'm not an employee. I didn't come here so I could do my own groceries. Yes, I know it's cheaper, and maybe that's why it works, but I'm willing to pay a little extra. I wish they still had self-service gas stations, but thank God now I have an electric vehicle. I get to drive past the gas stations. Right? You guys, that little bit of service is memorable now. That little bit of going extra is memorable. Alina, you asked for objection handling. Actually, what it's called is my outstanding buyer presentation. And I also have the outstanding seller presentation. They're my client discussion checklists. So you can search for outstanding buyer presentation or outstanding seller presentation. And I go over the client discussion checklist in both of those presentations. So you guys, again, just a quick reminder, it does not take that much to do something special for someone. Love is in the details. It's in the little things that you do. If you're in a relationship, it's leaving a little sticky note on the mirror. It's writing a little love letter. It's picking a rose from your front yard and giving it to your significant other. It's not spending $200 on rose bouquets. It's not going out and, spending $500 on a purse or going to dinner somewhere that you can't afford. It's the little things that make people feel special. For women, guys, it's doing the dishes. It's the little things that make people feel special. So how can you make that real estate experience something that is not hell, as Alina put it? How can it be, maybe you send them a pizza halfway through the deal because they're stressed out. It might be somebody who's been searching for days trying to find a moving company, and you hop on the phone and spend 15 minutes and make arrangements for them. It's these little things that you can do. And if you're paying attention, you'll hear them. If you're oblivious and you've already moved on to the next deal, you're not going to hear the little things, the little cries for help, the little, hey, maybe you could help with this. They're not going to say that. They're just going to use someone else. You guys, here's the crazy thing about bad service. People don't really say anything about bad service. They just don't come back. You go to a restaurant, people don't complain that much. You have a few people who do, but for the most part, people don't complain. They just don't come back. They just don't recommend it. They just don't post a review. They don't tell you that it was a bad experience. They just don't come back. So those are things to really keep in mind, is that what can you do to keep that experience being a step above hell? Maybe even a little bit better than that. What can you do to make that experience something that you'd be willing to do? I went through it a couple of years ago. I bought a house with my son in San Diego. Oh my gosh, the loan experience itself was hell. And I had a great loan officer. It wasn't the loan officer, it was the experience and the details and the requirements of what you had to go through. So here's the crazy thing that I think is insane. I can go buy, and I did, a $115,000 car, be in and out of finance in an hour, and walk off with something that is movable and hideable, right? However, we can't get through a real estate transaction without going 30, 45 days and them digging into everything but our firstborn. And you guys know what the number one reason for foreclosure is? Death and divorce, two of which you can't predict. It's insanity to me that the real estate process is the way it is. And the reason it won't change is because there's too many hands in the pockets. There's too many people making money. How can we rise above, and how can you create an extraordinary experience for your clients before, during, and after? All right, that's what I got today. You guys have any questions, comments, thoughts?
I actually have a story that's funny.
Okay.
based off of what you were telling us. So on my first deal with Val Turner, we were shopping for some plants at Green Acres because she, wanted to. And then I went over to the property to drop them off, and the sellers were there. And I was telling Val, I was like, yeah, we'll go send a gardener over to make sure all of it's like potted and stuff, and make sure that it all looks good. And then she's like, no, you should go do it yourself. I was like, why? She was like, just do it. I was like, okay. So I was like in my nice clothes. So I like rolled up my sleeves and I'm like crouching on the ground and I'm potting all these plants and stuff. And the sellers were just like so caught off guard. I was caught off guard a little bit too. And then it was funny because once I was done, they were like, wow, I've never had a realtor do that. I was like, yeah, get yourself a realtor who's gonna garden for you. And it was funny because I was following up with them a couple of months ago. Not even a couple of months ago, it was actually a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, how's South Carolina going? They were like, oh, we're actually driving back to California. We were gonna call you. We want to buy a house there instead. I was like, okay, cool. So Val was like, yeah, it's the little things. So it's really cool that you're saying that.
Yep, Val's an extraordinary realtor. She does really well. And that's the value of those little tiny details. I can't tell you how many times I've potted plants, I've cleaned houses, I've moved furniture. I'm not advocating to go do that, but I'm telling you, if it here's the thing. You get paid in direct proportion to your ability to figure shit out. I have shirts made, everything, right? So what can you do to go that extra mile to make people feel like they're important and that it's special? And that can apply to everybody in your life. What are the little things that you might do that make someone feel like they're important and that they're worth it and that you're willing to go above and beyond to do an extraordinary job for them? I think that there's so much value, and that's the best lesson you learned right out of the gate, Isaac. So congratulations. All right. Anybody else have anything you want to add? All right, we're going to wrap it up for today. So thank you guys. I actually love these open conversations like this because I never know where it's going to go, and it's fun for me. So I hope that you guys enjoy this. I am looking to put together my training list for the last quarter of the year. So if there's anything in particular you guys want me to focus on, train on, learn on, please shoot me a DM, send me a message. Let me know what you would like to hear, and it will be coming up. So thanks so much, you guys. Have an amazing week. Bye-bye, everybody.